problems, to look at performance issues, and to even see who's using APIs if the model is expressed in an API and that kind of thing. So we want to just make it a lot faster for you guys to build the models, and the data engineers are included too, because they have a lot of the work that.
I'm recording it for people who couldn't make it.
Okay, a lot of the work that's done is done by the data engineers and by you guys, right? It's not just one group of people, and there's a lot of kind of manual provisioning and trying to stitch things together, and one person will find a way to connect to Key Vault, and the next person doesn't know that person found a nice way to connect to Key Vault, and it's not very straightforward, and it takes time. So we're trying to solve all those issues and make it inherent in the platform. If you start developing on the platform, you just get the benefits of all the learnings, and we can continue to expand on that as people come up against new problems and they solve them. We'll roll those features into the platform when they make sense, right? So we want to reduce the development and deployment time, and we want to make sure that people are using each other's stuff, take dependency on the good stuff that we put out there, like the reusable components that some of you guys have worked on. Okay, so this is going to kind of unify the workspace area without, dictating the IDE. I took a survey, and there were no less than 12 IDEs used by the people in this room at the time I took the survey. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but that is the reality. Sometimes R is the right tool for the job, but it's not the most popular tool out there. There's PyCharm and there's your Databricks, and there's a lot of different ones, and I have that analysis if you want to see it, but you guys have all contributed to it one time or another because I've asked you. Not only did I ask you what IDs you used, I asked you what input and output data storage technology you use, because we need to support that too. Reduce the time and effort to provision a team. There's only one person in this organization that has done any pod provisioning for teams, and that's Todd. And when I talked to other people on his team, nobody knew how to do it. And even my leadership, we struggled to remember, well, what page was that? And we go into DevOps, and is that self-service management or is it administration? It's a pain in the butt to have to do that, so we've simplified that. And then that's true for Azure resources too. You guys often need an Azure resource. If you don't have access to a subscription where you can create one, you got to ask the data engineer or somebody, these guys, to provision it for you, and that's just not very time effective. We want to make sure that the code that we generate starts, in kind of a compliant and standardized state with good logging, so that you guys don't have to worry about app insights at the high level as you build your model and you do different steps, and the data engineers put different steps in their cleansing. They can just seed with a little bit of additional logging based on examples that we already have in the code. It's just going to be there for you. And then when you check in your code, so first thing, this thing generates code for you, right? It doesn't generate your model code. You'll still have to do that. But a whole bunch of the other kind of glue code that holds us together is going to be generated for you. And it's going to be checked into a repository that's created for the team on day one. So you'll not have to work necessarily with code that's just sitting on your laptop for weeks on end and not checking it in. And somebody asks you, well, have you checked in? And you say no. And people go, oh, wow, that's written. It's not going to happen, because the very base code is going to start right in the repo from day one. You won't have to worry about that. And finally, the whole pipeline, once you check in, we're going to automate all of the security checks that are required by the SDL, OSS, CredScan, Fortify. All that stuff is going to be integrated into it. Running the unit tests, should you have unit tests in there. Keeping you honest and making sure you do have unit tests in there. We're going to have some checks and some gates and that kind of thing. But it's all going to be done automatically when you check in code. You'll get that full suite of tests and even end-to-end integration tests too, automatically. If you have them, they'll run. This is what provisioning looks like today. These are some of the forms that you would have to fill out if you were going to provision a DevOps team with a repository and an area path and a bunch of other, backlog and that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, ADF or storage and compute, whether it's Databricks or some other kind of compute. I just took a sampling. There's more than 20 screens worth of things to fill out here, and you won't have to fill out near that many when we get done. As a matter of fact, probably only one person on the team will do this provisioning of projects and environments, and it'll look more like that. The left side will be for the project and the team, and the right side will be all the different resources you need to create your environment. And you would fill out the left side one time, or somebody would. Whoever is the pod project leader will probably fill this left side out. and then maybe that same person will fill out the right side per environment. So you'd start off with a test environment or a dev environment or something like that, and then eventually you'd go into the screen again and create another one. And there'll be, you can see there's a lot less forms to fill out because we've pre-chosen a whole bunch of defaults for you. That doesn't mean you have to go with those defaults, but you have to go in and change those defaults. We're going to take the common stuff, like for a pre-prod environment, we're going to use lower level SKUs versus a prod environment, right? It's cheaper. Makes sense, right? So we're going to default a whole bunch of stuff, but you'll be able to override it a couple of different ways. But ideally, none of you guys will even have to do this because the project leaders will do this for you, and you'll never have to say, hey, can I get you to provision this or that? Because if we've anticipated properly, it'll already be there for you.
What about like tuning the resources that are deployed? Like if I need more capacity or anything?
So yeah, then we'll have to go in and probably just tweak those and upgrade those right in place. It doesn't make sense to pre-provision or re-provision something that all you need to do is up level it a little bit. If you can scale it up within the resource itself without having to kill a resource and create a new one, you will be able to change resources, but ideally, you know, if it's just a tweak to an existing property on a resource that's already provisioned, you just go into the portal and do that.
So does this support all the current resources available in Azure or only?
No, it's the things that we're anticipating, right? And so right now you guys have built, you know, so the UI, this, by the way, this is a really nice design UI that I had a designer do. We don't have this exact UI. We have a demo UI that our interns came up with that is just the left side that actually does the right side behind the screen, behind the scenes. And it provisions all the stuff for like the DSRE project required, right? It provisions all of that.
So kind of resources means for you.
Like say, if you see like networking type of resources or compute that we see Azure, so everything.
Pretty much whatever it's needed for you to deploy to pre-prod, deploy to prod and execute as a batch processing or as a service, everything.
Okay.
So Databricks, virtual machine, or local, they all support that.
Even the storage, ADF, everything, all those things.
I see.
Key Vault, App Insights, it all can be done through here.
I see.
And are the resources unique per project, or can we also send a, like, let's say, a shared Kubernetes cluster?
So we're going to start off with, we're going to create one resource group. And then in the POC, not the POC, the MVP, we're going to say you're going to provision all new things for that. So if you already had something existing, we wouldn't let you do that here. You just wouldn't provision that, and you have to go and just add that into the project yourself. You're not going to add it to a resource group because it's already in a resource group.
Right. Okay.
Later on, what we'll do is there'll be a drop-down list box, which you can kind of see here because it's really bad. Sorry, you can say new AMLS batch or DSVM, and then existing will allow you to pick an existing one. Again, it will be included in the code as we reference stuff in the code, but it's not going to be part of the project level resource group because you already have a resource group if you're picking something that exists already. But we will let you do that. But that's not going to be an MVP. It's all going to be create new and MVP.
And what about provisioning like SPNs for? Is it also?
All of it. And if you find something that isn't done, let us know and we'll do that too.
Sure.
Goal is,
That's a basic thing.
yeah, we're trying to get it all done so you just don't have to worry about any of this stuff. Okay, so what these guys are going to show you are a couple of things. First, they're going to show you streamlined provisioning of that team. So they're going to spin up a brand new team with people assigned to the team and a code repo, an area path, iterations, and a backlog. And it's going to provision, it's basically a mock of DSRE, right? That, isn't it this? Yeah. So they're creating a new DSRE project team, and they're going to create a new DSRE environment with everything it takes to run the DSRE. You will be able to go into the solution, and it's not the model. We just put a placeholder for the model. You'll be able to go into the solution in the repo, open it up in your IDE, hit F5, it'll run. It'll log to App Insights. It'll just run end to end, so you know it doesn't have any bugs. All you have to do is start writing your model. And then when you actually make a change and check it in, it's going to run that whole CI/CD pipeline, and includes not just checking in and running the scans, but it's going to actually deploy it based on a containerized image. So it's going to, make an image, register that image, deploy it in a container, and then execute tests against that thing. Then they're going to show you how easy it is to go in and make a one-line change and check in, and all that stuff gets run automatically again, and you'll see it all logged with all the scans and everything done. So that's what they're going to show you in this demo. Okay? That is it. On to the next thing. Oh,
Okay.
you want me to press, or do you want to?
We have
You
the
got to present?
slides, yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, I think we have to show the pages.
In cases where we have an existing repo, are we just gonna like provision a new repository this way, then we sort of like manually move our code over, or can we?
So if you have so we want to have a repo per project,
Yeah.
right? Because you want to release the code according to the project, not this project with that project, right? So going forward, like each pod has its own repo right now. And so we would build, if a new project was spun up under that, we had a new customer wanted something, we would spin up a new repo. For existing, yeah, we'll have to figure out exactly how to get those kind of.
That's how we've been doing it in Service Health. It's one per project.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, can we just enhance those with this, or is it best to just sort of create a new one and under this?
So if you want to get onto the framework, we don't have to provision the team part of this. We can just provision the resources and get all that CI/CD stuff. We can work with you, but it'll be kind of like a one-off for each team that wants to onboard to this platform.
Okay.
We won't be able to do it automated, from front to back, because some of this stuff is already done, right? Yeah.
Okay, so as Lance mentioned, right, before we start any data science project, we need to keep two systems or two kinds of resources ready. One is Azure DevOps, so that PMs can go and start filling the backlog and make sure project is getting tracked on daily basis. And the second thing is setting up a pre-prod product so that we can start the dev process, right? So as he was explaining in today's scenario, if you see, right, there are many pages we are supposed to visit, and there are multiple steps we have to go through to really go and procure and keep all these things ready, and it's time consuming. In fact, you remember we were working on one of your projects, and to procure and keep simple key vault, it used to take so much time.
Exactly.
So let's see in this platform how it's going to accelerate the process of creating all these things. This is the portal. As Lance was mentioning, project lead is going to visit this portal, and you're supposed to enter the details about, okay, what is the area path we are supposed to create, what is the iteration path, what is the project name, and who needs contributor access. Like one of the ways is you can create SG. You remember the other day we were talking, security group you can create, and we can give contributor access to SG, and who needs admin access, pretty much whatever it's needed for us to start the project, we can enter the details. And let's make sure we don't have this repo name. This repo name is not there.
To prove that it's actually creating something.
Yeah.
Not smoke and mirrors, it's a real thing.
See, it's reputation for you. All these things. The security and anything.
So does this also create an entry in service tree if we are creating an?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It's on the roadmap, but not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't have any repo with this name now. As this process is going to take some 3 minutes to really procure and keep everything ready, let me go ahead and explain really what happens behind the scene while this goes on, right? So in this demo, we are mainly planning to cover two scenarios. As I was mentioning, one is batch processing, other model as a service. When I say batch processing, right, like assume we are done with our changes in the dev environment. So I'm going to check in. So next step is we are going to deploy model to pre-prod. Then that model has to be executed on daily basis. Somebody has to call that model. That somebody has to be system within our, like for example, in our case, it could be Azure Databricks. Like in DSL, we have Azure Databricks, which calls that model. And also, we have to keep this model closer to the data so that we can get the best performance out of in case it's a batch processing. So that's kind of what we are talking. The other is model as a service. Let's see in the second half of the demo, like what does it mean to productize a model? Like once you're done with the model, what does it mean to expose that model as a service? And how to categorize that service as a product? For example, in one catalog or in API management, how can we group all the similar services together as a product? So in the batch processing, right, what is right now happening during these onboarding processes?
Can you put yours in presentation mode? I think it'll be bigger.
Okay.
there, that guy. Yeah.
It's not visible.
It's just I can't read it. Maybe it's
Okay.
I'm the oldest guy in the room.
Yeah.
There.
Cool.
I can read that.
Okay. So as a first step, what we're going to do is inject a sample model template containing the actual skeleton code. So here what we are trying to do is let's make sure we follow some of the coding best practices in terms of, regardless if it's a C# code or a Python or any model, let's try to follow some basic coding practices in terms of having exception handling, in terms of having logging it at appropriate places, all those things. And also it's not like by default it may follow some set of coding practices, but if we have any other custom practices that we're supposed to follow during onboarding, we are thinking of like how do we support that. It should not be like just one set of practices. And also, right, regardless of what model we are working on, cross-cutting functionalities which are going to be common across all the models are like, for example, logging, right? We may have to log regardless whether it's a file or app insights or doesn't matter, but logging, we need a logging component. The other is data access. It's a blob or ADLS, doesn't matter, but it would be nice if we have common reusable data access component. And what is very important here is like accessing data access, it has to be in a secured way, right? Like it has to go through keyword. And now setting up keyword, it's not a simple process. You need to have a keyword setup. For that, you need to have Azure Active Directory setup. You need to procure a certificate. You need to register. It's a lengthy process, right? And we have to repeat this for all the projects. That's where we're thinking in terms of why not just automate this whole process. And this data access component behind the scenes should take care of all these things. From a model perspective, hey, data access component, can you get me this data from the blob? Write this data to the blob. Read, write is going to remain constant. Only data sources can change. That level of abstraction kind of we're thinking in terms of building that.
You've already built that. You've built an abstraction
Absolutely.
layer
That's what we
over
are going
many
to show
data
that, yeah.
access technologies so that you write you code to one model.
Correct.
And it works for everything.
Yeah. So
or everything we support.
it's like kind of if you guys have heard of factory design pattern, it's what it does. Like the model says data store is today it's blob. Tomorrow if it has to be ADLS, you'll just change ADLS, some kind of string or something. Then it decides, okay, for your read or write method, it's not going to change whether signature or anything. And of course authorization and other stuff. Finally, I was talking about batch processing, right? Of course, okay, in the dev environment, okay, fine, we are done with the development. I'm going to check in. Now, the question is now somebody has to deploy these changes to the pre-prod, which means we need to have a CI/CD ready, right, for every model. That's what now this onboarding 3 minutes of work. It's going to procure CI/CD, keep it ready, and point it to the new repo as well, right? Above that, if we need any customization, yeah, of course, we can work together and see what is that extra step we need to do really to do this. So these are the set of steps that gets executed during the onboarding process. Now let's see if it is done. This is for batch processing especially. Okay, so once we are done with this onboarding process, the first page, we get to see this kind of summary or dashboard page where we get a link for the new repo which we created, like this repo 999. And since it was batch processing, let's go to this notebook and let's just take a look at.
So when that provisioning completed, automatically fill out this page, has links, and you'll be able to go back to this as a reference. You go into the project, kind of explore, click on the project, and you'll see this. So you don't have to have like shortcuts in your browser all the time for these things.
So if you see, right, let me touch base on this reusable components, for example, logger and data. Here we are assuming during onboard, okay, actually how it's going to work, right? During the onboarding process, we are planning to list down all the reusable components, and project lead gets a chance to select, hey, you know what, out of all these things, I'm interested in selecting this. Whatever reusable components we select, those components are going to be referred in this model code, which is getting checked. Now we are assuming like we are selected. We have selected logger and data access there because at a UI level still we are not supporting this functionality. So this is AML logger, right? That's what I mean, we have been using in a couple of projects. So today it's going to App Insights. We have been discussing with CP team to onboard to UTP, right? So assume like at org level now, we should start logging to UTP, not app insights anymore. So changes is going to be just at this logger component level. There won't be any changes to the models. If there are 10 models referring one component, it just refers here and we'll deploy at a cluster level and zero changes. Like everything should continue to log as is, right?
So that middle part of the code is where they put their actual model code.
Yeah, I'm coming to that part.
Okay.
I'm just talking about the usable stuff first. Then data access layer, right? This is where, for example, get data store. Like this is a factory class, abstract class. It says, hey, get me the data store which can help me to connect to either blob or ADLS. This is kind of string we are talking about. You can change the string. You'll get this object, and that object level, it remains same, like read data, write data. No change in the method signature, only like what data source you have to connect to. You have to mention, and going through the keyword, all those things will be taken care inside this component. For us, it should remain same. And of course, as Lance was mentioning, right, like we have added some, okay, this is a real code. Like for example, we are connecting to the Revin like blob store, which we have our files. It's reading the file and it's writing back to the file. In fact, it is logging to the app insights as well, if you see. So this is like kind of, this is an example like how skeleton code is going to look like, working skeleton code.
So you would replace your model right in the middle part of that.
This is the one where replace the following code with actual model code. So let's go for the app insights.
So in that particular code, it's reading data from that particular blob location, right? So as part of the provisioning, you are also creating some of these things, right? So does your this model template refer to the newly created ones, or you're just giving a sample?
Yes.
Well, so we'll have to, your data source, your specific data source will be unique to you. And at the time that you do this, you won't know what that is necessarily all the time. And so we're not going to automatically point it to the place where maybe the data engineer has done the work and drop that. But in terms of the storage, you'll know what storage it is. So you'll have to like provide some part of the connection string, as it were. But after that, you really shouldn't have to do anything.
One other question I had was, once these resources are provisioned, say if we need those details, say what is the connection, so is there a detailed page for each of those resources where we can look at those details?
Yeah, that provisioning page that showed up with those links, there'll be a lot more links than that in the real one. For every resource that's provisioned, there'll be a link, and you click on that link, it'll take you right into the Azure portal into that properties page, essentially.
Very common scenario.
Yeah. And when you have multiple projects, different environments,
Right.
so you'll be able to view like that.
Okay.
You have that collection.
Sure.
You have access to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we executed
So
that
for some
model.
scenarios, I'll not be getting data from the data lake or blob, right? For example, in my project, I'm getting data from Bing Satori directly. It's in Cosmos. So how that integration
We
will
need
work?
to work. Yeah,
Yeah.
because right now we don't see.
Yeah, so we're trying to support the most common technologies,
okay.
and then as you come up with Cosmos, we have to support that UI technology to make the wrapper work for that, the read write essentially wrapper work for that, or we have to come up with something else. But Cosmos is, not uncommon, and there has been some work around trying to figure out how to access that. I know, was it Jin? Who's working on
Revin
Cosmos?
and
Revin?
Cation.
Yeah, so we'll have to work on those. A lot of the common ones we're going to support right away, but that one's a little bit more difficult to start off with. But,
Actually, in this DSI project, one of our data sources are also from Cosmos. But Raven just copy that data to our ADIS. And the data input here basically some aggregated data from the data preprocessing. But I think if we can copy the data to ADIS, this one should
yeah, it would work. Yeah, if you just move it, have one stage. But ideally, you wouldn't. If you don't have to do a bunch of transform, you would just like not make a copy of the data because why, right? So we'd like to support more direct access if we can.
Even in my model, I'm writing an initial scope script that actually slice and dice that Satori and take only the necessary copy of it, and then the model runs on top of it.
Yeah.
Same workflow maybe fit for there as well.
So here is app insights details. Like just now we executed the model, and if you can see right all the details. So this is just to show like it's all connected, whether it's a logging, monitoring, or we don't have something strict. That's process. At least now we can spend time on the actual model versus thinking, oh, how am I going to procure keyword? How am I going to connect to App Insights? Tomorrow, if it's UTP, what changes? Yeah, let's segregate all those things, and that's the idea.
So this is just the output from the, you just ran it,
yeah,
right?
that's what, like 325.
Just generated the code and then ran it,
Yeah.
and it's already producing App Insights output.
If you see the time, it's like 325 just now. So now let's see what does it mean to expose model as a service like text processing, and what does it mean to productize it.
Another quick question here. So in DSRE project, it consists of two parts, right? Data preprocessing, which Raven did on Databricks directly, and this is the ML model part. So can we combine both in using this template?
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. As of today, MVP doesn't support that.
Okay.
But from the execution point of view, if you see, right, whatever ADF we have procured, that ADF can call Raven's pre-processing plus your model together.
I see.
And in August, when we are releasing, right, in the first week, that is what actual testing we will be doing.
I see.
One ADF calling both, and that ADF passes that run ID.
I see.
That run ID, both pre-processing and model goes to App Insights, and that one run ID stitches these two together. That's what the actual real stuff
But I
is.
do like the idea, if you can collaborate in the same notebook for both pre-processing and the model stuff, yeah, we should be able to support that. I mean, that seems kind of, in some ways, ideal, right?
Yeah, in that way, the coherence is much better, actually.
From back end, we are supporting. That's what we have been executing. But from front end, still we have to.
I see.
Yeah, in fact, this is the ADF also that procured
Correct.
as part of this. So if you see whatever the notebook that was just created, that is linked here already. So even if you want to have a separate pre-processing notebook that you want, it will just be another step here. That's all that you'll have to do. Going back to this, so in this scenario, the second one is the common batch processing scenario, which is more like a scheduled job. The other is the one where we actually want to deploy it as a service. So we saw about, starting from, we have different personas in any project that we start, right? So the first step would be for a PM to be able to log in the requirements into the backlog. So for that, we need this area path, iteration path. Then the team should be given access to that so that they can view that. Next comes the actual place where they want to check in the code, that is the repository. And when you talk about repository also, it's not just about that. We should not be letting people directly check into master branch, right? And from dev branch, you need to make sure, like Danny the other day was explaining about how this data science project lifecycle typically happens. Without 2 peer reviews, you're not supposed to know it, right? So all those things, how do we enforce these branching strategies, policies, and coding best practices and standards? All those things are taken care. That's what I'll be working through. And then I'll show a sample of the actual NLP model that we have, which Peter and Adam had written for the text pre-processing. That is what we have taken, and we have converted that as exposing that as a service. And we'll also show, how do we package it, containerize it, everything is taken care of basically in this case.
Where is Peter now?
Adam is.
Oh, they're on the phone.
Adam's on,
Gotcha.
okay. So let's go back to that. So this was the repo name that he gave us, something like this, right? So now let's refresh and see the repo. It was just created. Yeah, this is the new repo that got created. And typically we were talking about the branching policies and strategies, right? You see all these branches have been created for you by default. And master branch here, if you see, it does not contain anything at all. Whereas if you go to develop branch, here is where we will have the as per part of the TDSP process, right? And again, we got input from Danny as well on this, like how do we want, especially to support the experimentation part of it. So the folder structure here is not the actual TDSP model that we are supporting. We'll show an example of the one that we will be releasing it. This is just a previous version which we had, but going forward, we will be having it directly under experiments. So you can go ahead and keep creating, adding or new experiment folders, and finally specify in config which folder we should be picking it to deploy automatically. So that piece will be integrated. That's the current sprint work that we are doing. So yeah. So now in this case, what we'll be seeing is instead of having it through one catalog, currently we are exposing this service, that NLP capabilities, as a pre-processing service as part of the Azure API management catalog. So here, we go to the developer portal. So this is like a product which from our team has built this completely. So we are exposing this now. So any partner teams, anybody who wants to consume, this is like the cognitive service equivalent, right? Which our team has built. So under this product, so people can subscribe to this product or specific APIs. I'm just showing, we have these different methods for text pre-processing here, but I'll just show a ping method because I'll be making a change right now and check in and then see how long it takes for us to actually again deploy it to the web app, right? So let me go ahead and execute this once. So here we are seeing this as a version V1 that is deployed, right? So now let me go back to the repo that was just created and make a small change, and then I'll walk you through the other steps as well. Because this CI/CD release pipeline, it takes around a couple of minutes, so let me go ahead and make that change first. And ideally, we'll be cloning this repo and doing it, and I'm just doing it in the
Is the Docker file part of the template, or is
yes,
that something we would build?
Yes, I'll be showing that too. So because it will take a few minutes, I'll just go ahead and check in. So I'm just making it as V2. So if we see all these things have been provisioned by default for you, this is how we will be having in only the API piece and the test cases, and very specific to that is what any data scientist will have to be focusing on. While this, let me go to the build. So if you see, I just did a commit now. This CI/CD pipeline was provisioned as part of this repo when we did, and now it is going to start all these sequence of steps. Now going back here, what are these different steps that we have? First thing is the component governance, especially with the OSS references and all, right? We need to make sure that our code is compliant. Currently, we have this component governance task which comes out of the box as part of this provisioning itself. But the plan is to integrate even 45 other grid scan, all those things as part of this, so that for no project you need not spend the same effort again and again, right? That's the idea behind that. The next important thing is the code quality. So here we have this task will automatically look for all the PyTest related files or methods that you have, and it will try to pull that, and it will also generate a code coverage report for you. So that way you can automatically decide, you can set that threshold, right? If you don't have these many tests or the code quality is not met, then don't even allow this to be deployed to even pre-prod or the next environment. So that is taken care here. Code coverage report, I spoke about that. And the final step would be actually deploying it as a service. So for that, then you will need to, any service that we talk about, we have to support versioning, right? So for that, we need to make sure that we package it and containerize it so that even if you want to deploy multiple versions and keep them running in parallel, you should be able to do so. So that is what is also integrated for you. So if we see, we are containerizing it, placing it in an Azure container registry, and then you will also have a web app which is linked to that. So now when I checked in, everything, it goes through all these sequence of steps, and finally it has to be deployed as a web app for consumer. And the last step is the monitoring and alert. Even as part of the build definition, you cannot specify the direct keys, right? There also you need to refer the keyword. So if this sample build definition will also be provided. So if you want to go ahead and edit, you will see everything it's like compliant. Even the build is referring to the keyword only, and it's not having anything. And integration with ICM, that is as of now pending, but that is what we'll be working on next. So it gives that complete end-to-end for you.
So the service is Azure ML Container Services, ACS.
Azure Container Registry we have placed. This is just like a Docker container that we have.
Right. So is it the
CI, or it can be AKS, or it can be
Kubernetes? Or
that is about the deployment, right? When you talk about AKS, it's all about the scale that you want.
Right.
For now, we are using it as a web app because that itself is sufficient for that level of scale that we would want.
Okay.
Unless AKS means you want multiple products which you want to do, and you want to maintain that cluster, right?
Right.
Which ideally for our situation, web app is sufficient enough for us. Okay. So that's why we went with web app in this case. So here it's still going through all these steps. So if we see, like I said, key vault is done. It is referring what version of Python that you are specifying as part of the model. And then what are the packages that this model is dependent on, that is taken care. Then comes the actual unit test cases. And the test cases, this is the actual NLP one that we said, right? So here we have around 10 plus test cases. Yeah, so we have around 11 test cases, which is also taken care. And then to that step. Next step would be the code coverage, and it will publish the code coverage results. Then if we say it's actually building a Docker image, and this went to the next step.
So does it every time build a Docker container, or is it?
Yeah, because it needs to maintain that version, right? Whatever you build in your local should work as is when you deploy. So it needs to have that complete setup every time, and that's why we specify that as versions. So if you do not want the older versions, you can discard them or you can delete them. But at any point of time, if you decide that you already have some consumers using an older version, but you want to add another new capability to support something else, then you can maintain. You can always refer the container registry and pick the whichever version you want.
Yeah. So
And also in addition to that, right, before you go ahead and deploy the latest version, usually the check that we are planning to do, we have not done, but we are planning to do is download the previous version which you deployed, get the metrics, measure the current model metrics, and if it's not good, we have a check, hey, don't go ahead and deploy. It's all those kind of things, it gives the problem.
So depending on the type of model, right? Like if it's a predictive model, then we want to make sure like if your already deployed model is like 80% accuracy if we see, then the new model is like performing at 75%, then you don't even want to deploy that. So depending on the type of scenario, out of this 4 batch processing or text or predictive models, we want to make sure that we have that thresholds or gated checking or gated proceedings.
I had a question. So for this deployment, there are these steps, right? So where do you go and define these steps? Like
this build gets created for you automatically.
Oh, it gets
so
created.
it is currently pointing to the repo, and that's where I was telling. Finally, as per the TDSP structure, right? If you decide what is that experiment folder that you want to deploy, and you have this API method, and this entire template will be provisioned for you. All you will have to do is specify the PY file name. In
I
this
see.
template.
Okay.
That's all you will have to change. So even for the test cases, currently we are referring for some test file here, right? Instead, you will just update it with yours.
Okay.
And
one other
yeah.
Question in your deck, you had mentioned about the circular thing, right?
Correct.
So is that all happening in a sequence, or are there any steps that go into parallel execution as well?
Actually, all these are happening sequentially as of now. We can execute that parallelly, but
Some things can go in parallel. We need to speed this up.
Especially this unit test execution, integration test can be done in parallel.
Okay.
And build agents do support that. We can do that, but it will be overkill for like kind of 20 tests, 30 tests.
Sure.
People usually will have 100, 200 tests. That's when. Otherwise, it hardly takes 3 minutes now. Yeah. So.
And even in this case, what we have here is we have separated it out as 2 jobs, so that anytime when you want to deploy, you will actually be executing and focusing only the unit test cases, right? Which is to prepare your build. After deployment, you want to make sure that it has not broken the existing functionality. So we are having that as a next sequential job. That's what. So we have defined the sequence here. So this, if we see, it is again doing the same thing, but it is making a HTTP call to the actually deployed API.
Okay.
Now,
like regression testing.
Yes. If this fails, then you should not let it proceed.
Yeah.
You should roll back. That's the. So now, since this is done, let me just go back and see here. So if we see, overall it took around, now it's like V2, this version. So if you see, from the minute you check in, it's like 3 minutes and everything else is provisioned and ready for you.
Yeah, so this sprint, what we are doing is we are working with Adam. Whatever his changes are there, it's going to be part of these, whatever we spoke about, exposing his model as a service. Once that is done, probably, we are going to work with what will be the next set of use cases we can start working on.
Yeah, and to add even the utility that Danny, you were talking about to integrate. So first, we'll be provisioning these experiment folder with the manifest metadata file and all that. After that, if you want, they can even use that utility to create the new folders. And that.
Visuals should ensure that sample TDS.
Yeah.
So this sprint, once this work is over, right? Whatever folder structure, flat folder structure, that's not how. Whatever we discussed TDSP, like code, docs, that's how all the code is done.
Yeah, so this is the structure that we are having here as per the discussion. So we have one code folder, data, and then docs, And inside the code, we will just have the experiment folder. Currently, we have always it will look for this experiment final, which will be the one that will be picked for deployment, unless we add that support in the config where you can specify which version you want to deploy. And you can keep adding this particular folder alone, you can keep repeating as a number of experiments that you are trying to create. So this would be the final structure instead of what we showed. That's our current sprint.
So what do you think? Check in, made a change, checked in, and you can see the unit test run based on deployment in a container. You don't have to do anything. Think that'll save you guys some time?
Yeah, simple way to start is whatever sample unit test file, sample model file generated without changing the file name or anything, do the changes there, that's all right, check in. Then it'll take care of automatically picking those files, executing test cases.
So early in a project, like before we ever get to the API, what happens with this framework, right? So let's say I'm doing my early experiments and I'm checking code in. I don't have any API code. I don't have unit tests or anything yet. What's going to happen when I check in?
Okay, so let's take predictive model as an example, right? For example, when we generate these code sample model templates, we are going to have a couple of unit test cases, which of course will fail. We'll make sure it fails. So it's left to us. For example, if you feel like ideally it should not be the case, like where a unit test is overhead, I don't want to kind of pass the unit test. That should not be the case. So we'll make sure unit tests are failing, and you go and make sure you make the changes so that unit tests pass. Once that is taken care, what level of unit testing you want to do, what should be your code coverage at org level, we need to decide in terms of 70% coverage or 80% coverage. That's broader discussion. But minimum test, once we make sure like all the test cases pass, as a part of CI/CD, assume version 1 we are deploying. We are not done with any changes. This is the first time I'm deploying. It's not going to do like, hey, we don't have anything in the production. No need to, I don't have a reference to check my performance or anything. So it just goes and deploys version 1. It's all good. Next, you will do experiment 2. You check in. During that process, it's going to check, what you already done with experiment 1. Let me download that, compare the metrics. Then before even uploading this, let me compare the metrics of this model with that. Now, again, there we can have a policy. Do you want to override, like, even if it is not performing to that level, I'm okay in still pushing it. It's okay. I mean, we have to decide. But if you have to have a check at that point level itself, yeah, we can avoid really pushing the changes.
And also to answer that, your first point of when you don't have anything, right, when you're starting brand new, that's why we are providing this template kind of file and the template unit test file, which was like you were telling, it will fail in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So all you will have to do is, everything is provisioned and ready. You may have to fill in those pieces to make it work. That's the idea. So that it's like enforcing you to make sure that you are writing test cases, and at the same time, everything else is automated also for you. Because if we leave it later, like, okay, you keep adding the files and then you specify, then when provisioning, you will not be able to know when you want to automate everything, right? So that's why we follow the specific pattern. After that, you are allowed to, you have the flexibility to go and modify, add, or change anything.
You can modify the test cases that are generated too. You can just say assert true and just override it like they didn't exist at your own peril. Because later on, if you forget to do that.
But code coverage will be 0.
Yeah, code coverage will be 0.
Yeah.
Eventually, we'll have a gate in there. We'll check code coverage, and you won't be able to push to a higher level environment with that.
For example, dev branch, you'll not be able to push it. That's where.
Yeah.
Because from there, it goes to pre-prod. Right?
Are there any branches that don't kick off the CI/CD pipeline?
Local feature and user branches does
it. Currently, it only does with dev.
Got it. Okay.
So currently, you're only supporting Python language?
Yes.
Any plans?
And we have some C# components, but that's C#.
Do you have other? What else do you want to see?
Typically, data scientists use R and Python, so these are two.
So R would be the next one you would want to see.
Okay.
Yeah, currently there was a limitation with even the ML workspace. They were not supporting R, and when you want to have that flexibility of switching different compute types.
This is centered around the AML workspace. We're taking a big bet on the product team for that, and so when they support R, then we should also support R too. And that's really just kind of a matter of going through all that kind of bootstrapping code and changing some of that stuff to be R, especially the code template. Right.
So, kind of different options that by next sprint we are planning to support is, of course, batch processing, the notebook scenario or Python scenario. Then predictive models, then text analytics, like NLP scenario, like four options we are planning. Including all
Anything
these.
else, if it's different, it will be good to receive feedback from you.
Well, we don't have the provisioning UI ready, and that'll be a while, actually. If you have new projects that you want to start, we can help you get started kind of manually. It'll take, a few hours on our side to do that. One of the things is that the code branch structure, the repo structure needs to adhere to our standards. So if you already had a structure, we might, provision this and then have you move your code into that so that it matches the structure, because that structure's imperative for the automated CI/CD process. So, but we'd be happy to help anybody who wants to use this. And as a matter of fact, we've already done that. Whose project did we do that for? It's not just the DS3 project. There was a subsequent project, RNF. We've already kind of done that to help them get started with that a while back. I haven't heard any feedback on that. Have you guys heard anything?
It's excellent.
Awesome.
If we don't hear anything yet.
So if anybody else, who has a Python kind of project wants to, kind of move over to this, or you have a new project coming up you want to try, even if it's just an environment, we still have to do the repo and all that kind of stuff. So we still
kind of volunteered or nominated the reusable NLP stuff.
Yeah.
Adam and Peter. And I also nominate Ananda's HVAC smart stuff. It'll be a good one too. Yes. Any other volunteer we were very welcome.
We need to put out user stories for that, because that does take a little bit of time to do. And these guys' time is like super valuable, so you must find it. Hold on, shielding them, because they get spread too thin.
With the batch deployment template, is it on your roadmap to support like Apache Airflow and those sort of like orchestrated batch jobs?
Yeah, I think as of now, we've never thought about it. That's what more and more feedback we get it, I think,
Okay.
Anything else that you would want to see or get this added, it would be good.
Okay.
We're using the AMLS workspace,
AMLS
ADF, and then ADLS workspace. AMLS workspace to start off.
AMLS is also kind of optimized to use different kinds of run times. So that's what yesterday in the Discover.
Oh, you guys found that?
Yeah. We were talking to them and they were optimizing AMLS.
Yeah.
On need basis, that's what we can.
Any other thoughts, feedback, questions, anything else?
What are some of the features you guys are adding to it besides service tree,
Service tree, one catalog. We have to add some of the cloud governance stuff in as we learn more about that. Yeah, Web Scout for UIs, if there's a UI component to so larger solution. So there's all those different kinds of scans, and then post deployment under certain circumstances. We don't want to push things necessarily to one catalog from dev, but certainly we would want to do that in prod, or maybe even an upper level pre-prod environment, but not dev. So yeah, there's still, well, we've done a ton of work. These guys have done a ton of work. There's still a lot of work to do, and the UI is also a lot of work. And think about providing defaults for people, or a way to override particular defaults in a simple way. When you're talking about 14 or 16 different Azure resources, we're not going to create a properties page that mimics the Azure properties page. We can't use their page, so we have to come up with kind of smart ways to allow people to change the default behavior of this, and that includes maybe even the code templates eventually themselves too. So there's a lot of work to try to deploy this out. So we can build it for us if we have a very common understanding of what our coding practices are for our team. But as soon as we try to roll it out, I can guarantee you they're going to have different ways they want the code to look, and we need to be able to support that. Otherwise, we're not going to get any broader adoption. And we're still working with the Azure product team to try to get this kind of, at least the provisioning side, into the Azure portal. And that, as I found out from the new users guide that I just found, our onboarding guide, is a heck of a lot of work. So
in addition to that, AutoML is what we are thinking of supporting as a template. And along with that, if we want these models to be executed in parallel, not just in parallel, but you have to attach different compute targets. It's not like always AML or ACI. whatever really it's needed, Databricks for something, ML for something, and batch for something batch. So that also ML pipeline supports. That's what we are thinking in terms of, I think that will be a very good addition to whatever we are supporting.
It's a lot. It's a lot of work, but we're also just getting started because the space is so varied.
A question. So while the provisioning is going on, are you also following some naming conventions for these resources?
There is a naming convention that Mano and Darren worked on, and so that first screen that you saw where you put in those names, some parts of those names are used to name the resources, and so that naming needs to follow the standards. I don't know if we've actually made that happen. Did you, when you provision the resources, do you use like the short name or the acronym?
Yes.
And then does the rest of it follow the naming pattern that Mano put out?
Yeah,
We
whatever.
use this one for Wipro,
Yeah, but
not the
Mano has like dashes,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
4 segment names that I thought were a little, I wasn't super thrilled with them, but that was the standard that he and Darren
Yeah,
came up
but
with.
that's-
We need to deploy that. There will be naming standards, then stuff will get named automatically, but the beginning, the first part of the name will be the things that are specified here. So as you go into a large list of things, you can see. And the better way to handle that is actually go into the resource group, because everything provision new will be in the resource group, and now you see all the related things to your project or environment in there.
Yeah, I asked because for one of the projects when I spoke to Mano, he said we need to follow naming conventions. So
Yeah, we are working closely
Yeah.
with them.
We will enforce that in here, we'll enforce that, but so certain resources have a limitation of like 16 characters, and some of them are 35 characters, and you have Azure resources that vary a little bit, and then you have Azure DevOps resources that vary a little bit too. So you have that short name for the repo that's just the repo that's the segment, and a longer name for like the area path or something like that. So you see the area path name, the short name, and the repo name, but that repo name is supposed to be acronym because it's not just the repo name, it's going to be used for other things. Those 3 versions of a project, shortened versions are going to be used in the name somewhere, depending on what we can get away with in terms of how many characters that resource happens to allow. I wish they would unify it, and I wish they would make it like 100 for every resource, but then we wouldn't have to have short, medium, and long names.
Any other questions? Let's try it, and then if you guys want to try it on your own, just look at the UI stuff, provide some feedback. Let's compile it. Who would like to take a lead on compile all the feedbacks, and then we'll give it back to Guru and Laurie.
We started working with Adam, probably.
Adam, okay.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, you have been nominated.
He's not there, so
Not
he's
yet.
It's online. It's
Excited about it.
Yeah, that's good too, because he's part of the team.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Good job.
Thanks.
Remember I did